right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Public Safety Committee. We'll call the meeting to order here at 12:30. Thank you all for being here. We are going to kick off our meeting here with Fire Chief Brown doing a presentation on the Fire Department staffing adjustment to address the current overtime usage.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. This issue came up at fiscal about 6-8 weeks ago when we came for a budget amendment for a significant amount of overtime to wrap up the fiscal year. And at that point, city manager and I both felt that fire needed to go back and investigate not only why it's happening, but what we can do to mitigate that overtime, which frankly right now is on a pretty steep increase, and we wanted to see what we could do to address that. So I want to talk a little bit about how we staff and hire. The chart on the right, I don't want you to attempt to read it. It is extremely small, but the two big red circles delineate how we used to hire and how we hire now. So the top circle on the right shows a very long decline. In the past, before I was chief, or even assistant chief, we would go 2 to 3 years without hiring. So we would hire way bigger classes, 30 some people, and we would attrit down over 2-3 years, and then we would hire again. The problem is that's not the most efficient way of doing things, because frankly we would be quote unquote overstaffed, although there's always work to be done out in the streets, and then we would use an exorbitant amount of overtime for the last year until we hired again. So back in 2014 we started what you see on the bottom right circled in red is a much more concise hiring model. We attempt to have a 10-person swing now instead of 20 or 30. So when we hire, if we're authorized for, as in FY24, we're authorized for 210 total authorized strength for the department. We will hire up to 215. So we'll go 5 over, not 10, 20 over. We go 5 over, and that lasts us about 6 months. We average about a retirement or someone leaving about once a month here in the fire department. And then that last 6 months, we're saving on overtime. So it really does even out. What we've noticed, though, is the last couple of years, we have bigger batches of people leaving. We're spending more and more overtime. And so when we went back to look at how to address this, this is what we found. We're spending over $3 million in fire suppression overtime. And the city managers made this comment a few times. We are more costly than the police department now as far as overtime is concerned. Because fire suppression overtime is not all of my overtime. I have 47 programs that also utilize some form of overtime to train in the river, to train for hazardous materials, to train for technical rescue, to maintain our masks, to maintain our fire stations, to maintain our fire trucks, to do extra fire inspections during special events. All these things are in addition to normal day-to-day staffing. I can tell you that overtime is going to continue to go up for my organization if we continue to maintain the same level of staffing, which is your fire chief. I would strongly recommend that we maintain where we're at now. The city's growing, the risk is growing, and frankly, our call volume keeps increasing quite exponentially. Our South Battalion chief, so they work out of our Division Avenue Fire Station. They're responsible for setting staffing for the next day. Picture playing 3D chess. That's what it's like trying to staff our fire department right now. They have to see who can drive, who can ride the seat, balance seniority numbers, and then many days we're starting in the hole by 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people based on various factors. So then we start the callbacks and we go through and exhaust all the lists. We go through our admin personnel. Then we go to force backs, which are occurring several times per week. If they do answer the phone, they're mandated to come into work. 2 weekends ago, my deputy chief of ops rode a fire truck to keep us from shutting down a fire station. I was next up on the list. So we were down to the last two firefighters in the city, frankly, was the deputy chief and myself, and that's probably not a good place to be. Although I could probably still put out a fire, our younger people are much more adept at it. The qualitative research going around to the stations and talking with our members, they're tired. They're burned out. They don't want to answer the phone. We're at the point now where we have exceeded the efficiency of using overtime to fill vacancies. There is a law of diminishing returns. We're past it. We're past it at this point. So obviously, we want to minimize the budgetary impact. We do not want a runaway overtime budget. I feel that we caught this in enough time to make some positive changes and turn this around. We want to avoid excessive overtime. We have members taking 40, 50 hours a week in overtime in addition to their normal 52-hour work week. That's not good for their family, and frankly, it's not good for you when they show up exhausted. The last thing we want to do is, of course, reduce that burnout, and we've been working with Robertson Brain Health lately, and those employees in our department that are taking the excessive overtime, they are at about a 2x increase for cardiac disease, anxiety, and dementia precursors. So there's some real long-term impacts here that if you take that step back, it may look like it's going to cost a little more. It's going to save more down the road. So here's where we get into some numbers. The analysis. We utilized 58,000 hours of overtime last fiscal year. 58,000 hours of overtime. 18,000 was for our programs. Remember those 47 programs we discussed. About 40,000 hours was fire suppression. That's our personnel on the big red trucks going to fire calls, 40,000 hours. In any good improvement, you'd like to see about a 50% reduction. So that was our goal when we looked at the data, is to say what would it take to reduce overtime by approximately 20,000 hours in fire suppression. When we looked at that, we found that we would need to increase suppression staffing by 13 personnel. Right now, we're at 177 people assigned to fire suppression. We would want to get that up to 190. 190 would essentially eliminate the force backs and bring that excessive overtime back into an acceptable range. Now, I want to be very clear. Overtime is a good tool to utilize. I do not advocate staffing enough to completely eliminate overtime. That's not cost effective either. But it's finding that sweet spot. And for a city of our size, right now, we're heading towards $4 million in overtime. That's too much. That's too much for us. So what we'd like to do is bring that back down. Now, we normally run a recruit class about every year as well. We've projected out, and by the end of this fiscal year, we're going to lose 9 additional personnel, 9 more people, okay? When we look at the class, in order to get these people into fire suppression, we have worked very hard and are ready to put a class and recruit class starting October 30. Then they have 4 months of fire training, 2 months of EMT training, a couple weeks out on the street being shadowed and mentored, and then they're finally able to count towards our staffing. The reason that we're trying to expedite this in the spring, the last 2 months of our fiscal year, if we don't do this, we're looking at about $50,000 to $60,000 in overtime per week. Per week. That adds up quick. And so by trying to right-size suppression staffing now, we can still mitigate approximately $400,000 of overtime later. Now, I want to be very clear with you, and I've been very open with city manager. If we choose to maintain this level of staffing, it's going to cost money. i.e., we're going to spend it either way. And so do we spend it on overtime or do we spend it on people? And my recommendation on the last slide is to find that balance. We would still spend several $1 million in overtime, But we would also bring a budget amendment forth potentially in September if we think this is a good idea to bring that suppression number up to 190. That's where we're at. In FY25, we would realize full cost savings and overtime reduction. So if we move swiftly, we can save a couple months of overtime in FY24. And if we maintain that 190 in FY25 and that little 10-person swing, I feel like we're going to get back to where we should be. This has slid for quite a while, and we started looking at this under Chief Lehman's tenure. And early in my tenure, we took another deep dive, and I don't want to force our people back. They're here 24 hours at a time. Most of them volunteer for extra duties. And frankly, when I call someone on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day and mandate them into work, I'd rather be riding the fire truck, and I will. Ops chief and I and the other deputy and assistant have talked, and we'll take the hit on those holidays if we need to. But I feel like that's where we're at. So with that, I'll open it up to certainly any comments or questions.
Thank you, Chief Brown. I guess I'll start with just one question. So if $3 million estimate overtime this, can you give me like a trend of, say, the last 5 years of what overtime was each of those past 5 years?
Yes. So COVID threw a big monkey wrench into that because we worked an exorbitant amount of overtime. Really, it hasn't waned like we thought it would. So if we dial back 5 years, we were at about $1.5 million in overtime. And it's slowly crept up, and we're looking at $3.5 million to $4 million next fiscal year if we don't do anything.
And you anticipate that if you hired additional firefighters, you're still going to have overtime, but it's going to balance itself out by next fiscal year.
Correct. So when we actually ran the numbers, we're looking at about $1.9 million to run this class. And they save right at $2 million in overtime. So it's almost dollar for dollar where that sweet spot is.
Okay. I'll turn to my colleagues. Commissioner Mooney, Commissioner Sassi, any questions, comments, anything you'd like to ask Chief Brown?
Yeah, Chief, I just want to ask a question on the recruiting methods.
Yes.
How many individuals do you have in a class right now?
We have none in a class right now. So we just had 18 graduate a few months ago. But we've also had multiple retirements since then. So every month their efficacy goes down, and we are able to save less and less overtime. And so even without increasing our total authorized strength, even without increasing anything, I'm still going to have to come back and run my normal class of 9 to 10 people.
But you want to try to hire 22 by October, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So we currently have over 200 people on the list. We've been combing through that for the last couple of weeks. We've run a few more physical agilities. We've scored more oral exams. And so we are, as of tomorrow afternoon, we'd be ready with a recommendation to go forward with that.
Okay, one more question.
Yes, sir.
Are you able to hire firefighters from other departments from across the state or?
We do, and we have, but I will caution us to switching our model completely. So we often now hire from municipalities across the state. We put them back through our entire training class.
Okay.
Back in 2009, 2010, we received SAFER grants, federal grants, and we needed to onboard people very quickly. And so we did a 6-week orientation. They came in with everything. We hired people with firefighter 1 and 2, EMT, hazmat, everything. 6 weeks, put them on the rig. That completely kills any chance of growing our own and diversity. And so our recommendation after we did that, the one time, and Civil Service Board's recommendation is go back to the way you used to do it. We're one of the few agencies in this state where you can show up with a high school diploma and a good attitude and a strong back, and we will teach you to be Grand Rapids firefighters.
Okay.
That's a positive.
And that's going to be effective.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Sassi.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. My question was around, thanks for the data in terms of the numbers and what that point of where we would recoup that would be. Can you share, you had shared that people working 52 hours and then perhaps another 40 to 50 on average in terms of overtime?
Yes.
While the cost is important, what do you think that average overtime would be that individuals would still pick up? So just looking at how do you reduce it from that 50? Is there a sweet spot number you're looking for there?
Yeah, so if someone's working 75 to 80 a week on our schedule, to me, that's acceptable. When they cross that 100-hour threshold,
Yeah.
they are physically and mentally exhausted.
Okay.
And the pool of people nowadays taking overtime continues to shrink. It's a different time. It's a different generation. People really value their family time, rightfully so. And so it's different. It's different than 20 years ago when you had most of the department saying, I'll work overtime. We have a much smaller pool that says yes. And so if I can cut that overtime in half, that effectively puts guardrails into how much that small pool would be able to work.
Okay. My follow-up question is around, so today we talked in fiscal about GRPD class, and we talked about, what were some of the demographic pieces as it relates to both gender and race and diversity.
Yep.
You talked about the eligible lists that we
Yes.
have as a city, so individuals who have passed both the physical and the written test, so then.
And the oral exam.
And the oral
Yep.
exam. So that means they're eligible for hire. They meet those minimum qualifications.
Yes.
Do you have a sense of what that overall gender, race, ethnicity, diversity looks like?
Yes.
And then can you also add how that is being impacted as well with the cadet program that the commission has supported? And
Yes. So we were apprehensive when we first thought we need to hire quickly because post-COVID, we haven't fully ramped up our going to events and recruiting. I'm happy to say that all the different lists that the deputy and I have compiled and been looking through are extremely diverse. It is fantastic. So large amount of African American, Hispanic, even non-binary. There's a lot of different groups represented on this list. And so I feel very comfortable moving forward with this process and bringing back a suggested hiring list of a diverse group of people. We need to fire up our recruitment efforts. We need to get out in the community. Part of that is the cadet program. We've been working with 6 individuals that are, frankly, most of them are inner city youth. And we've had a fantastic time having them ride our fire trucks, work in our training division, cycle through every piece of our department. 3 of them are on the eligible list and would be scheduled to be interviewed and potentially hired. So right out of the gate, Deputy Chief Freeman's program has 3 out of 6 on the list. I think that's a win.
how old how old is the list? Because we can keep that for 6 months?
1 year.
1 year, okay.
1 year.
Thank you.
Yep.
A couple more questions, I guess. I don't want to, I understand there's a problem we're trying to solve here, but I want to look back for a second. For the last, several years, we've talked with our, this is Public Safety Committee, so we've talked to our friends in the police department about, their authorized strength and not having enough individuals to get to the authorized strength. But with fire department, you have an authorized strength and we're at authorized strength. And so now we're coming in after we just got done with our, our budget, where we set a budget for the year, and knowing we're just going to blow that budget out of the water. So I think from a, my CFO's not sitting up here, but I always give her a hard time that, we like to overestimate the budget, and then we can come in underneath it and look good. And in this circumstance, it feels like we've kind of done the opposite, that we set a budget, and now we know we're just going to blow past it. So that seems like, I'd like to be in the other, I'd prefer it the other way with a little money in the bank at the end of the day.
I agree.
So I guess, I understand there's a problem. I want to help you solve the problem. I want to help you solve the problem by not, physically exhausting and mentally draining the people that do work for our community so that people can be safe. But I want to know that the decision we're going to make, I guess, is going to ultimately, we're going to essentially eliminate the overtime, or at least in future budgets. Next year when you come back, you're going to give me a realistic budget number that you're probably going to be able to keep both, the standard dollars in plus whatever overtime is all contained within a budgetary number.
Yes. So this fiscal year, we're at about 2.3, 2.4 in overtime. That would actually be a realistic number if I can get up to about 190 in suppression. There are other areas of the budget, which this isn't fiscal, and I don't want to get into great detail. But there are other areas that we're still concerned about, like our maintenance services. But we have some long-range goals as we build that new training center to bring fleet and facilities in-house, work on our own fire truck. So we're a couple years out from being 100% like stable. But this is a big step. This is my largest overage each year is overtime.
To the manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief. I just want to clarify that what you've said is that if right now the projected for suppression is is that suppression only 3 million
Correct.
total?
Correct.
3 million suppression.
Yes.
And if you're are allowed to add these additional positions, you estimate your fiscal year 25 overtime budget would be?
So it's about 1.5 in suppression, and then that additional 18,000 hours. So we're in that 2.3 to 2.5 range, all in for overtime
For 25?
for 25.
Okay.
Yes,
But for 24, 3 million is just suppression.
correct,
Okay.
And there'll be another 1.5
for everything else.
non-suppression.
Yeah.
So it'll be $5 million over.
Close. Let me, borrowing from the police conversation Commissioner Connell alluded to, previously we studied police patrols need and looking at adding staffing as well as redeploying from administrative to operational. And we talked a little bit about this. Can you talk about a similar approach in the fire department, why it would not be beneficial to redeploy administrative assignments to suppression in order to
Absolutely.
create more resources for
Yeah,
operations?
sure. So ISO is coming in this fall, and they're going to be evaluating our organization. They look at not only what we do out in the streets, but they look at our training and our fire prevention as well. Our Fire Prevention Bureau, frankly, has been undersized for a lot of years. They will ride the fire truck if we're going to shut down a station. They will respond during storms and sit on wires down, as do all administrative staff. But when we looked at our mechanics, when we looked at fire inspectors and redeploying them out in the field, it's actually cheaper for them to be up there doing what they're doing. Private fire investigators are quite expensive. Private fire inspectors, we do have one, and are certainly open to looking at that in the future. But most of our spots are bargain positions, and so that's something we'd have to work through labor with. We don't have a lot of quote-unquote extra spots in admin. In order to maintain our ISO training records and our soon-to-be EMT status, I have 4 people down in training, and then I have a full-time recruitment lieutenant. And frankly, that recruitment lieutenant really needs to become a permanent thing, because growing our own and the cadet program needs to be a permanent thing. And so as we did, we went through top to bottom and looked at redeployment. There's just not a whole lot there. There's not a whole lot that I could simply eliminate and shift out into the streets to get the capacity we need.
Any of our citizen members have any questions or comments? Mr. Davis?
Thank you, Chief, for your presentation. I'm not in a position to be making financial decisions for our city, thankfully. But I was curious about the data analysis as you presented it. You spoke briefly about the generational shift you're experiencing with our department, and I'm curious if some sort of a weighted scale was applied to the changes you would anticipate with the addition of bringing your staff of suppression up to 190. And really behind that question, I'm asking, is it still our most expensive staff who are going to take the overtime when the phone calls come in, because a younger generation is going to not take your call? And will we see the savings that you've presented here today?
Yeah, I do believe so. So when we calculate overtime, we utilize an equipment operator on overtime rate, which is the midpoint of overtime. So when I do have a young person answer the phone, I'm actually saving way more than I calculated. And then sometimes we do have the lieutenants and captains that say they'll work, and then it costs a little more. So we've done this analysis for years, and using the equipment operator overtime rate is pretty darn accurate for us.
Thank you.
That's a great question.
Other citizen questions? I guess I have one more question too then. I mean, obviously, we're talking about adding an additional fire station too. How does that
Correct.
conversation play into this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So we obviously are going to be breaking ground next spring, summer on that station and moving ahead. That's an additional 12 people. Now, let me explain why. Our model requires 47 personnel a day, 24 hours a day, to run the 25,000 incidents that we run in the city of Grand Rapids. So that 47 a day is what we base everything off of. If I were to simply shut down a fire station, I wouldn't need to call back 3 people to staff that engine. I could save the money. But that district sits vacant and other stations would have to come in. That lengthens response time. I can tell you that fire grows exponentially every minute now with the modern plastics. And with the housing density in our city, as close as the houses are, every minute does make a big difference for us. And so 47 is our base model that we're working with right now. When we add that additional station down south, that's going to take it up to 50 per day. That station down south has been recommended for close to a decade based on the response metrics in that part of the third ward, which frankly were not great. And so we as a fire department and you as a governing body did decide we need to do something down there. And so that will bring that additional expense every year of 12 additional firefighters.
So let me see if I'm wrapping my head around this correctly here. So you're asking for 13 additional firefighters right now.
To right-size our current
To
model.
right-size your current, but then you're going to have to ask for how many more to staff that station. So again, I want to make sure that we're making a comprehensive recommendation that I want to talk about this once and make the right decision on an authorized strength that I know both, serves the need of the community, but also, create some sustainability in terms of fiscal matters moving forward.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, now, we were not prepared to, this is the chief's preliminary estimate of staffing. We still need to go through the budget process to evaluate the staffing need as well as the capital process. So we're not expecting a future staffing recommendation. Certainly your prerogative, but we would, that was not intended for today's conversation.
Again, I'm just trying to wrap my head around what, if we're needing 22 people hired to get us 13 additional authorized strength, and then what the future looks like,
Right.
and then that adds, also chairing the fiscal committee, I think about these things a lot, right? Like thinking about, what's the total budget of the fire department going to be now, or is now, and what is it going to be in the future for both the next two recommendations?
That's
and,
valid.
Right,
That's valid.
and how are we going to make sure that, as we look at a $138 million general fund budget, that we're, what percentage of that is fire, and how much, is
There's
how's that going to grow? So,
If I may, there's a couple financial points that I'd like to expand on briefly that I think some of us may not be thinking about right now too, but we have. One is that burnout. When we reach that point, my sick leave goes up quite a bit. People are exhausted, and so when they're mandated back, they may take a sick leave day just to recuperate to come back to their normal cycle the next day. And we've passed that point with a lot of our crews. And so that keeps going until we can get back. The other point that I'd like to bring up is our pension fund. The way our pension works is we look at how much overtime and total the salary, the final average salary on a rolling average. This increasing amount of overtime continues to increase the pension roll-up when our people retire. Now, don't get me wrong. They have earned every penny being out in the streets 24/7, 365, in all types of conditions. However, from a long-term financial perspective, continuing to spend this amount of overtime each year has a lot more further reaching impacts than just the annual GOF budget.
But going back to your suggestion about staffing for the new stations, I think those are That's his anticipated numbers. We will evaluate that as we contemplate the future, both capital plans for fiscal year '25 as well as staffing levels. And I know that there have been other discussions around how to build more sustainability around fire funding, but those are conversations we'll need to explore more.
Commissioner Sassi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think to that point around public safety and just the continued conversations about budget, things that we've had with the police department, could we also in future conversations kind of show some of the historical pieces that were reviewed today, percentage of the budget, those sorts of pieces, I think would be helpful to make sure we have some uniformity in a lot of this decision making. Thank you for the information, noting that about the pension piece. And then I was thinking the same thing, Commissioner, about, obviously the new fire station, but also just trying to weigh this out also with the investments that we'll have along the river. And so people having more access to another point where I don't know what a percentage breakdown would be of the type of calls that you all have, but I think that would also be helpful too. I know that was some of what occurred with the police department. We kind of look at, what is the best response and what type of individual, what type of resources. So, they've stood up here a lot with some of that. And so I think we should ask you that same question of, are there different ways to disaggregate some of those calls or, with some of those rescue pieces, is that going to look different? So those are some of the questions I have in my head of how do we connect all these intersecting points of development in the city? And I think to your point, Commissioner O'Connor, how do we look at this really holistically? And I also think issues around, I haven't been following what's happening in California with the hurricane, but there's so many different severe weather events. I think that's also another, I'm interested in seeing of how that plays out in modeling as we have this future discussion. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. You're not necessarily looking for any action from the committee today, just a first presentation. So,
All right.
thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. That'll move us to our second agenda item, which is presentations and updates by the police department regarding monthly crime statistics, CLEAR, and the police volunteer program. Welcome, Chief Lindstrom.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. How about the other, yeah, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Perfect. Thank you, sir. So we'll go through a quick update on monthly crime statistics. You can see homicides, 13 too many, but 13 is trending in the right direction from last year. And we were at 11 last week. Unfortunately, we had a domestic-related murder and another sort of high-profile murder. An arrest was made in the domestic-related murder, and the second murder progress is moving forward to the point where we're in discussions with the prosecutor's office. The detectives are doing a phenomenal job. Again, the national average for murder solving is 55%. There is a very small amount of individuals that live in this city that are willing to take another person's life. And so solving these murders and making sure that those individuals are held accountable is going to make a significant impact on the safety of everyone living here. And the detectives doing a phenomenal job. Even last year, we're already up to 73%. 13 of the 13 total murders, we have 6 closed by arrest and prosecution, and several that were in negotiations with the prosecutor to wrap up. Auto thefts, take a look. Remarkably, they're actually showing a few down from last year, but this doesn't tell the whole story. And this slide is a better indication. If you'll see back in June of 2022 was really when the Kia and Hyundai trend started. And so although it's shown we have about the same number year-to-date auto thefts as last year, the numbers are significantly trending down. You see the summer month, 229, 241, 202. This June, much lower, July, even lower, and that was the highest number we've had in recorded history last year. So we're trending in the right direction, and that's A lot of that to do is the work of not only the detectives doing a phenomenal job identifying the mostly young offenders, the cooperation of the juvenile justice system that we've been working with, and a lot of really intentional efforts by individuals in the community to support kids and get our youth to see that this is not the best way to spend their time, and it is extremely dangerous and damaging to the individuals whose autos are being stolen.
Chief, can I interrupt? Just what do you think the arrest rate or the closure rate is on the auto thefts? And do you think that has a effect?
Well, unfortunately, I probably put it at less than 50%, probably 30% or so. But for a while last summer, we were talking about like 20%. And we came up with a process, forensic evidence gathering, and we just closed probably hundreds of these cases through fingerprints, and realized that they were mostly 13, 14, 15-year-olds. So then it was an issue. We see the same fingerprints over and over and over on the same vehicles. Not all of those got charged, but we were generally able to identify, again, it's probably about 40 or 50 kids that were responsible for 90% of the auto thefts in the city. And then working with not only the juvenile justice system, the prosecutor, but there are a lot of intentional groups. I know Realism is Loyalty was here at the last commission meeting. J.D. Chapman's been doing a lot of work with that group of kids and getting them, letting them know that there are adults here that are willing to advocate for them and look out for them and kind of put them on a better path. And so I think that's part of the not just the detectives identifying the offenders, but just other people in the community stepping up and interacting with these kids and trying to find a better path forward for them.
Thank you.
Aggravated assaults trending down over a 3-year period, which is excellent. We hope to see that continue. Commissioner Asasi did mention we were talking about diverse hirings, and year-to-date 2023, we've hired 27. And there's one more hiring process in the works that's going on now, which was approved this morning. Of those 27, we hired 5 females, 1 Hispanic recruit, 2 black recruits, 2 Asian recruits, according to our records. Obviously, we'd like to see excellent candidates and excellent diversity to reflect the city. We are exciting that we got approval this morning for those GVSU candidates. As you can tell, the class that we started last week currently puts our vacancy number at 29, but that doesn't tell the whole story. Is we've been doing tremendous progress with lateral candidates. So just because we hired 8 this morning because of those, authorized 9 for GVSU's Academy, we're also going out and getting those lateral candidates so we could get, double that number for their start date, which would be they'd be hitting the road in February, which is tremendous. On the horizon, GRCC for the first time is holding a shortened 4.5-month academy January 3rd. It's the first time they've done something other than a 2-year program at GRCC. And we talked to them. They're going to have seats for us in the class, so we have an ongoing process right now. I guess it just closed, but we haven't picked the candidates that we're putting through that. That's a sponsored process. And then the next GVSU Academy will be April 29, which, again, we're going to pair up with certified lateral candidates. So trending in the right direction. I knew that this year was going to be a challenge staffing-wise. This summer was going to be a challenge. There was a lot of overtime for the police department as well, a lot of tired officers, but they put in really 100%. One of the things I left out erroneously on this slide was 266 illegal guns recovered as of August 1st. That's over a gun a day, mostly with no force involved at all, taken out of the hands of sometimes some very violent individuals. That is all for the update on that, and I can take questions, but perhaps I should invite Officer Bernardo up to continue the presentation.
Please.
Okay. I'd like to introduce Officer Caitlin Bernardo, who is a 17-year law enforcement veteran, so married to one of our fine Grand Rapids police officer, mother of 3. She is head of our CIT program now. She is one of our best, if not the best, crisis negotiators, and she leads the CLEAR Women's Support Group, which we'll talk about today, as well as our volunteer group. Oh, she's standing right behind me. Sneaky. All right.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
I didn't do like this fancy PowerPoint. I like to just speak from personal. Just push down. Okay. So like the chief said, I am in charge of the Women's CLEAR program. CLEAR stands for Coalition Leadership, Education, Advice, and Rehabilitation. So there's a male and a female CLEAR. The male half CLEAR, I think, has been around for over 15 years now. Females, I think we're on year 4 or 5, so it's relatively new still. But I work with women on parole and probation, and really just mend the relationships between law enforcement and them transitioning out of prison or jail or whatever it is. I included some pictures. Again, I'd like to just kind of speak from experience. So every Tuesday, so I just actually came from my CLEAR meeting today, we meet at Urban Family Ministries right on Eastern. We cover various topics, but right now we are going through a self-love journal. The women and men's CLEAR is held very differently. The men's CLEAR is more, lots more mentors, men who have been in the prison system 40 plus years, coming out mentoring the younger group. The female aspect, I have a lot of females and I do a lot of the talking. That's just how they like it sometimes. Sometimes we have days where we don't want to say anything, so I don't have any problem leading the group discussion. I take great pride in all of them coming saying they can be 100% themselves. I am completely genuine in everything I say to them. There is no judgment. There is no drama at our group. And I say that because I also do a CLEAR meeting in the jail every other Wednesday. And a lot of the females there said that, they're afraid to share their thoughts and stuff because they go back to pods and then the drama starts and they fight and stuff like that. So in my group outside, that's not allowed. I don't let my girls talk badly about one another. If I hear it's happening on the street, it's addressed. But it's a very big respect thing. We respect each other. Those girls are my family. I want nothing but the best for them. When they succeed, that makes me feel like a proud mom. We've helped get kids back from CPS. I write recommendation letters to help them get apartments. A lot of them struggle to find jobs, and if they need me to write them a reference, I am all about that. Like, that is our relationship. Our relationship isn't I'm the police and you're someone who is from the criminal justice system. Like, it is putting an officer on their side. They can still be 100% victims, which a lot of them have mindsets that, I'm on parole or probation. I can't, report this crime that's happened to me, and I'm trying to break that mindset because they absolutely can be victims still, regardless of whatever they've done in the past. And that doesn't define them either. Just because you have a felony doesn't mean that you're a felon. I try to get that out of their head. I've had so many girls become so successful regardless of what has happened in the past, and be amazing contributing members of society. So I'm just really trying to help build it up and heal some trauma, because a lot of them have childhood trauma with the police, whether it's arresting their family members or, them being taken, with CPS with the police. And I've had many of the women tell me that I've completely changed their outlook on police. I go in uniform, and it helps them know that, me being 100% how I am definitely not your normal, aggressive police officer anyway. But they get to see a different side. They see past my uniform. And so they've told me, hey, I got pulled over, and instead of immediately being so scared, I saw you in that, officer, and things went so much more smoothly. And it's all about, the CLEAR program is about ripple effects. Them rippling into their kids or their family, and I just am very passionate about the CLEAR program and what we do for the city. I have, obviously on the photos, we have parties, we do craft days. Some of them have never had birthday parties before, like things that we take advantage of, is stuff that I love to, let them experience. We played Pin the Tail on the Donkey last November, and the girls were having a blast. But so many of them admitted they didn't get that kind of stuff growing up. They had very traumatic backgrounds, and it just really, really helps break everything they've thought. And really builds up their self-esteem, and it just makes them better people just doing minor things like that. Let me see what else. I asked my girls, I call them my girls. They don't have any, sometimes people get upset. They're like, oh, your girls, they don't mind. And if they did, I would definitely stop saying that. But I had them tell me what clear means to them. Clear to me is somewhere I can go where I'm understood, somewhere I won't be judged for my past mistakes or current struggles. A lot of my girls say they're having the worst day ever. I don't force them to talk when they come, but like just being there and listening to other people, I make sure that when they leave better than when they came. And they could say nothing at all. It's just a very supportive, positive group of women at all different stages. I have one female that did 20 years in prison. She's been out for 7 months. She has been coming since she got out. Just the change in her, her personality, and she's blossoming, and it's just like so proud to see that. But I have girls that come right out of jail, and they can see themselves when all hope is lost, thinking that, going to jail or prison is a vicious cycle. They're going to be stuck in forever. I have a girl that they can be like, oh, that was me, and they can really relate to each other, all different aspects, and parts in their life. Again, there's absolutely no judgment. They get zero judgment from me. We talk everything through. I work with a lot of their parole agents, and we tell them right out of the get-go when they get out of prison and stuff, if they don't feel comfortable talking to the parole agent, come and talk to me. We'll work it out, before they get to a part where they're, violating their parole and stuff. But just building those relationships is so important. And some of them have done several years in prison. They don't know how to transition out in the real world. And so that's where I come in, and that's where my partner Ray comes in. We have so many resources, where it's, places like I have Julie from the Women's Resource Center comes, and she helps my girls try to find jobs and stuff. We all just work together. We have people from the city coming in there and working together. I know the Men's Clear has a lot more resources that actually come in. I have Women's Resource Center, and I invite anybody that wants to come in, female-wise. If it's a male, I make sure my girls know ahead of time because they have some male trauma in there, and it's like a safety thing. But yeah, I don't know if anybody's got, we do another thing. So we partner with the MDOC. So I work with parole. I'm a parole liaison. I don't have to have girls I don't close my doors to anybody. If you're not on parole or probation, but you have some experience where you've been in jail or out of jail, and you just need a good support group, absolutely, my door's open. Everybody can come in. But we do partner with MDOC. We just were approved for, I think, $51,000 annually. So us working with me and my partner, Officer Ray Erickson, we do house checks where we check on the parole houses that are in the city. We do mentoring. So obviously what I do every Tuesday. We do compliance checks with parole if need be. We do transition meetings. I've talked to numerous girls at Huron Valley, which is the women's prison, over Zoom. So they meet my face, see my face before they come out, because a lot of my girls will say they had some, resistance coming to a support group that was led by a police officer. So I always tell them, they come to one, I'm pretty sure they'll be sold to come to the rest, and it hasn't failed yet. So we get, I think, $48 per, it's only parole currently, parolee that we have any kind of mentoring contact. I honestly had no idea that this happened. My partner is the one that does the billing. So it's not obviously about the money for me and stuff. I would gladly do it for no money. But we do get money that goes into our general fund from MDOC with the partnership that we have, so we could get up to the $51,000. Before I move on to volunteers, does anybody, I know I just kind of,
Colleagues or committee members, any questions?
I have one.
Yeah, Commissioner Moody.
Thank you, Officer Bardo, for what you do at CLEAR. I'm familiar with the CLEAR program with the men. I think at one time Officer Mason was
Yeah.
engaged in getting that program off the ground. In your program for your women, is there room in the future for your women to become mentors to other women in the program?
so MDOC is starting and a lot of my women want to. We have recovering addicts and stuff, and that's all their goal is, they want to become mentors to other women. So MDOC, I think, just started a program called Walk a Mile, where they're going to pair people that have gotten off parole successfully with people that are on parole, which is amazing because it's real life lived experience. I actually just did a reference letter for one of my girls for that program. So there are opportunities, but obviously, I think some of them have tried like Arbor Circle and other kind of mentoring things, but it doesn't fit like what they have envisioned. So I think the Walk a Mile will probably be great once it gets, started and everything. I think it just was given the blessing, and I just saw him the other day, actually. So it's got to get up and running, but I think that will probably be the best. But yes, a lot of my girls, definitely, that is something that they are truly, interested in, is for mentoring other females, absolutely. Yep.
And who was the youngest person in your group?
Let's see. I think majority of, that's the thing, now they changed. So I have 15 regulars, and honestly, a new one can come every week. So it doesn't, I have new people, but I'd say my youngest is probably in their early 20s, but they range all the way up to almost 60. So, and some of the girls, they were on parole at one time. They came, to CLEAR years ago, and then they found themselves in trouble, so they came back, and no one's made. Currently, I have nobody that is made to come to my meeting. It's all voluntarily. They all just come. Do I work with some of the probation agents and stuff that tell their girls they should come? Absolutely. But once the girls come, they usually come by themselves, so.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right. Thank you for that. If you want to move on to the volunteer program, that'd be great.
So I am also in charge of our volunteer program. I currently oversee 17 volunteers. We actually just recruited 2 more. They've been fitted already for their uniforms at NIE. They must pass a background check. We do like a building access background check for them. I think a good number for me, there's no set number on how many we can have, but I'd say probably a comfortable number would be like 25, so I can hire a couple more, or not hire, but recruit a couple more. They help a ton with abandoned vehicles. We work with the 311 system now, and every day I come in, there is pages of abandoned vehicles. If we didn't have them, our officers would be doing abandoned vehicles all the time. Like, I think last year we tagged over 4,000 abandoned vehicles. But that's like a majority of what they do is they do those first. They write parking citations, and with that, it's, they're checking abandons. They see a car that's parked too close to a fire hydrant or left a curb. A lot of businesses and apartment complexes will call and ask if we can drive through and do handicap parking and stuff like that. So I can let them know, hey, we just swing by, a couple times a week and check this lot for handicap. So that's basically the parking citations that they do. They check on residences that, in the Grand Rapids city, people who leave on winter vacation or any vacation for that matter are like, hey, I'm going to be gone for a couple days or weeks or months. Can you have someone stop and check? My volunteers do that. They check the exterior. We have a whole form you can fill out on the website. And then also our YANAs, which is the You Are Not Alone program. And that's really we say it's for elderly and stuff, but I mean, who doesn't need someone to check on them if they've had a tragic death or, in that kind of circumstance. So I think we only have a couple Yanas. It's actually like super underused. Same thing with vacation checks. But even when I was still on patrol, you'd get a call to a certain address where someone living alone, and you're like, yeah, that person could probably benefit talking to, one of our volunteers and just having them check on them. We meet every couple months for like appreciation aspect. I get them donuts. We go over things, any questions or concerns they have. We also hold a banquet for them every couple years, so we can give them awards and their stripes on their uniform for their years of service and their pins and stuff like that. They range in age probably 20s to 80s. It used to be the senior volunteer program, but now it's just the volunteer program, so there is really, you just got to be over 18. So we have a very wide variety of ages. A lot are retired or have jobs that, don't take up a lot of their time and stuff. But they all, one thing is for certain in my group is, they are very passionate about giving back to the community and helping the officers and stuff really, take a load off of, what they do daily on patrol. So this is just how you get to the thing. Basically, you'll fill out, it's like a sample questionnaire, kind of tells me why you want to be a volunteer. It gets sent to my office, and then I give them a call, and I usually have them come in and meet me face-to-face, and then I'll give them a background packet. They have to work a minimum of 8 hours a month, which doesn't seem to be a problem. A lot of my volunteers work a couple times a week, so holidays and stuff, it gets a little bit shorter staffed. But yes, they drive our white vans. They have a magnet on the vans that identify who they are, and they all are in the same uniforms that have volunteer patches on them. And just a couple pictures. A couple of my ladies are retired school teachers, and every time they go out, they give books to children in our community. Like, that is something they do, and the kids love it, and I love it too. So. But right now we're doing a stolen vehicle competition. The volunteers love to find stolen vehicles, so they always take a picture with them, which that is Tom Roberts. They all have nicknames too, but I won't go there. But but yes, they were always giving me pictures and cards like, oh, we found another stolen. So this year I am making a little competition, so whoever finds the most stolen vehicles gets like a special award and stuff at the end of the year. But yeah, they're just amazing and super, super happy that they work for us. So.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, this is just a couple stats.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you managing that program, and
thanks.
super great that we have people volunteering and willing to help out and fill in some of the gaps that we have.
Yeah.
Colleagues, are there any questions, comments? Commissioner Sassi?
Just a quick question. For the qualifications or the requirements for volunteering, I see it says U.S. citizen. Is there a reason that we have to have that as one of the qualifications?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
If we could, perhaps if you could, maybe we could take it back to the department to see if that's something that needs to be, hopefully that maybe that might be a barrier for people. So,
Okay.
Thanks.
City Manager?
Unrelated to the stat, I think the chief wanted to provide clarification to one reference from earlier this morning, and don't know if he's prepared to do that now.
I did, yeah. Well, the mayor's not here, neither is Commissioner Perdue, but I was asked about that.
Hiding on your
I
back.
used to be a detective, but I think I've lost my talents. A question was posed in regards to the definition of civil unrest, and I erroneously stated that the definition was from the state law. The qualification in the definition of 3 or more people is from Michigan state law, but the actual wording that we use is from the federal definition of civil unrest. So I didn't want to be unclear on that. And the reason we didn't use the full state definition is because the state definition of civil unrest is specific to civil unrest involving firearms and explosives, which doesn't, fortunately, encompass every riot situation that we've seen or sort of civil unrest situation. So if someone's breaking out windows with hammers and poles and things, that would fall under the federal definition, but not the very limited state definition. And then the question was posed by the mayor as to what criteria the state police used. And I actually did talk to the state police and reviewed some of their procedures, and they have a much lower threshold for use of drones than we have in our draft policy, and that's just permission from a commanding officer or the commanding officer's designee. They don't really limit it at all. So clarification made, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions for the chief while he's still here? All right, well, thank you to the police department for their reports today. Appreciate everyone. And we'll move on to our final topic of discussion, which is safety concerns regarding the deer population levels in the city of Grand Rapids. And I see Mr. Hurt walking to the microphone.
Yes. Good afternoon, Commissioners, City Manager, committee members. I know I'm pushing right up to the end of your meeting, so I'll try to move through this quickly. For those who don't know me, my name is James Hurt. I'm the Managing Director for the Public Services Group with the city. And a couple of meetings ago, back in June, Commissioner O'Connor had asked some questions and wanted some information related to deer population in the city and how that relates to vegetation, complaints from residents, car deer, accidents. So I'm here today to talk about that and kind of go through a few things and talk about some of the remedies and some of the statistics around the deer in the city. So when we think about the city's strategic plan and our values, sustainability and the environment are key components of that. So the philosophy around deer management in the city, and I'll just read this to you. Grand Rapids values our shared ecosystem with all urban wildlife, including deer. We certainly have deer in our city, we all know that. We aim for coexistence in a way that balances safety, the natural environment, and the built environment. Our commitment is to a sustainable city where residents enjoy urban wildlife and can live together. And this is an actual picture that our city treasurer took for us. So I wanted to share that with you. So when we talk about deer population and what options do cities have or municipalities have, it really goes back to the Michigan legislature. They give authority to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources to manage wildlife in the state. Under Public Act 451, the wildlife and their habitats of the state are valuable public natural resources held in trust by the state. And the state has a duty as a trustee to manage its wildlife and their habitats effectively for the use and enjoyment of present and future residents and for the protection of the environment. So just to kind of clarify that, I know there's been some questions about how communities can do that, municipalities can handle or manage deer in their jurisdictions. It really falls within the authority of the state of Michigan. A couple of things that just to point out from a legal consideration, the city's weapons ordinance, and I'll talk a bit more about that, does provide for crossbows and pneumatic guns to be used within the city under certain circumstances, and I will share that in just a moment. Right here is the city ordinance. So under section 9.174, no person shall discharge any bow, crossbow, pneumatic gun, or other device capable of expelling a projectile in the city except, and there's some exceptions listed, at authorized target ranges, on other property where firearms may be discharged, on or within private property with the permission of owner or possessor of that property, and has to be done in a safe and reasonable manner. So there is exceptions to being able to use different kinds of weapons in the city if you're going to look at doing something in terms of deer management. What kind of strategies are available through the DNR or municipality? Hunting is certainly one option. Sterilization is one option. The use of repellents. You can go down to the True Hardware store and buy repellents to spray on your plants, your hostas, to try to deter the deer from eating your hostas. That's one option. I know that you can put fencing around your plants, your shrubs, your trees, whatever that might be. Culling and removal. In my research on this and working with the law department, this seems to be one of the most widely used and effective strategies that communities use in Michigan. Obviously, there's public education. Birth control is an option with the deer population, and habitat management. So I mentioned the Department of Natural Resources, and what happens when you ask the Department of Natural Resources to come in and to take a look at your community. They would review it, provide an assessment, and determine if there is a deer population issue. They would issue a permit. So here's a couple of communities that we did some research on, Ann Arbor being the biggest one. When we talk about urbanized environment, that's pretty close to the size of Grand Rapids in terms of in the state. Kalamazoo has done some things as well. University of Michigan and Dearborn, and Meridian Township, which is located over by Lansing, also has a deer management plan. So one of the permit requirements that the state uses is they use scientific research to justify the need to manage the deer population. This justification results in serious disease, and that's happened in several communities in the state over the years, significant safety hazards, and then the deer count. They'll do aerial deer counts. They base it based on like an acre or a mile, a square mile. How many deer can they find in that particular boundary? So here's I know this is going to be really hard to read, but here's some experience that Ann Arbor had. They started the program back in 2016, and they started doing a sterilization program. And that worked well, but if you can imagine, it's pretty time-consuming and pretty expensive to sterilize one deer at a time. They came up to the year of 2020, and they moved into a different type of program where they contracted with a contractor to come in, and they culled about 150 deer in various parts of the city. They did that in the parks and on some other private property. I'm not going to read all this to you. You can read it if you want to have more details on it. But they have since discontinued that program back in 2020. They haven't started it back up. They did donate the venison that was culled out. There was 63 deer removed at one time, but they did get up to 150. Kalamazoo, this came from a group of neighborhood association folks who organized an ad hoc committee and presented to the city commission in Kalamazoo their findings. And it really was based on a couple of phases. One was to develop and implement education, deer carcass removal program, some fence ordinance. They did some adjustments to their ordinances in terms of size of fences. And then other ways to look at no feeding. Under state law, you're not permitted to feed deer right now. It's illegal. So if it's happening in our community, it's happening illegally. And then the second part of the phase was to work with the MDNR, which I kind of talked about before, leading to research and understanding what the deer population was like, and how could they do it in a short, medium, and long-term management program. All right, let's talk about some of the statistics. What you have before you is information that came from the Grand Rapids Police Department. So if you look at these numbers, these are UD-10s that are completed by the police department on crashes that happen in our city. So the first part is really the crashes that involve the deer that a UD-10 was completed. So in 2021, there was 30, 2022 was 26, and as of, this is about a month ago in terms of the date, there was 4. But if you look below that, there was also established an online reporting program where residents could go on and report it themselves. There was not a UD-10 created. So if you combine some of that, the numbers seem pretty consistent over in that chart on the right. And there's also some data here where there was a humane disposal of the animal by an officer. What I find interesting is this next slide. This is a slide of all UD-10s from all agencies that are within the city of Grand Rapids limits. So if you keep in mind, we have freeways coming through our city. We have M routes, and Lake Michigan Drive, East Beltline. Those are state highways. And it could be, and I guess I'll refer to the chief, Grand Rapids Police Department could respond, but it's more likely going to be Kent County Sheriff's Department or Michigan State Police. So this one gives you some perspective on injuries that occurred as a result of those accidents. And if you look through there, 2019 was the highest year in terms of total crashes within the city, but 2020 actually had more deer crashes in the city. And if you extrapolate the percentage of those that were deer crashes to total crashes, it ranges about 0.7% to about 1.5%, 1.4% of the crashes were deer related. And then you can see the number of injuries that are off on the right-hand side. And I can tell you that it's been well over 10 years since there's been a fatality, and I'm not sure I can even tell you exactly the year, but I know it's been well over 10 years since there's been a fatality related to deer. Here's some additional data for you. Deer carcasses that are picked up by Public Works. Now keep in mind, if someone hits a deer and it's off on the side of the road, they may not report it as a crash, but the Public Works will go pick up that carcass. And as you can see, the numbers have risen. 2022 was the highest number in the last 5 years. And if you go down further, you'll see calls that are coming in. So nuisance calls to 311 would be those that are having deer eating their bushes in the backyard. What can they do about it? And then the carcasses are the calls that come in as well. So we do get a number of calls for picking up animals. Deer is one of them. It's one of the highest ones we get, and the Public Works Department does pick those up. Last slide. So potential next steps would be a request to the State of Michigan Department of Natural Resources to perform an assessment and determine if Grand Rapids has a deer population problem. I asked the Kent County Animal Control folks to stick around, and he's here if there's any questions on that side, but we would look to collaborate with Kent County because I think this is a regional discussion in terms of the Health Department and Animal Control. If MDNR does come in and do an assessment, we would evaluate what the next steps would be. That concludes my 3 minutes. No, 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Colleagues, questions? Committee? Commissioner Sassi?
I don't remember what slide it is, but a cull is, I think I know what it means, but it's essentially like where they're being
They'd be removed
removed by force.
by force.
Okay, I think some people might not know what that word means.
That's a
and-
standard word by the Department of Natural Resources.
Okay.
I know we've had some questions internally what that meant.
So not like killing Bambi that somebody might say to me or something like
That's
that.
what it essentially
I just
could
want to be really clear. I
Yes.
probably shouldn't have said that, but
Well,
I'm hanging out again with John O'Connor too much. But anyways, but I just wanted to make sure that people knew what we meant, truly what we meant by that language, that it would be a specific sort of removal of them. And so anyways, I just wasn't familiar with that language. Thank you. Hunting.
Commissioner Moody?
Thank you, Mr. Hurt. Question is that I would like to ask, number one, is that what relationship the county and the city have working together? You said Public Works will remove carcasses. Those carcasses are in the city of Grand Rapids.
That's correct.
Is that correct? And county will move those that are in the county.
the county will, on state highways, they'll remove them for the state. And then on the M routes, or the county roads, the road commission will pick those up as well.
Okay, so if a deer died on my property, I can call Public Works and they'll come pick that deer up.
It has to be out on the public right of way.
Okay, so if
We don't go
dragging
on,
the
we don't go on private property.
what if I pulled them up, chopped them up, and put the rest back out?
If it's in the right of way,
That's a
sir,
joke, guys. That's a joke, so don't take that serious. But no, I understand. So we have to make sure that, I think I heard the mayor say earlier that if it's on our property, we're responsible.
That's correct.
To get that removed. Okay, I definitely understand that. So city managers, that was a joke, man. Don't put that in the notes. It's already on television, but don't put it in the notes.
So I guess just as a takeaway to wrap things up, is it a request that we could make to the DNR to potentially do that study?
that would be your choice, yes.
Yeah, is that something this committee would support the recommendation to have the DNR at least look at it from a scientific perspective and see what their thoughts are? Anybody
Say it again,
opposed?
sir?
I think the next formal step would be that we request that the DNR maybe look at our community and see what the population is, okay, so we can make an informed and scientific decision about if we need to do anything or not. So I would be in support of that. I don't know. I'd ask my other colleagues if they would be in support of that.
Yeah, I would be in support of that. I was going to say something funny, but I better not say it.
Not enough jokes at the dais.
For the record, we've been talking a lot about. Thank you. For the record, we've been talking a lot about animals today. I think this has been more than we've talked about. We talked about it at Committee of the Whole, so we need a little bit of humor. But I wasn't familiar with this. You mentioned science a couple times, Mr. Hurt, and so I do think that knowing that other communities have done it, that we have a state agency that we can go to, I think brings a lot of clarity to this. So I appreciate this presentation. I would support that. Thanks.
Very good. All right, and with that, we will conclude the Public Safety Committee here at 1:44. Thank you all for being here.